You're listening to Technomics, connecting you to insights on digital transformation and the marketplace, with your hosts Robyn Itule and Jeremy Nelson. The hosts' opinions are their own. Enjoy the show.
You know, what's possible is a really big question. And I love this question because it's one that our president of Insight US, Steve Dodenhoff, asks all the time. And it's fun to get into those conversations with him, which is something I think people are really going to hear today.
Yeah, it was really interesting as we kicked off this first interview with Steve to watch him kind of chew on the interactions he'd had with our clients about how they were trying to just even approach the client engagement model and just the number of possibilities and things that are out there in the marketplace today to help empower them, that it almost becomes its own barrier trying to make a decision on how to move forward.
You know, when you have so many choices, it can become absolutely overwhelming and you get paralyzed about what decision to make. And the thing that I think becomes really clear as you listen to Steve is you only have to listen for one thing: your customers.
That's all that matters at the end of the day. Just making sure that you're giving them what they really need.
When we come back, Steve Dodenhoff will join us, and you don't want to miss our conversation with him. And now a word from our sponsor. Engaging your customers with modern technology requires a modern platform and infrastructure. Enter Microsoft Azure.
All right, I have to stop you right there, Robyn. Is it Azure or Azure?
You know, we had this conversation in season 1, and I believe what we landed on is it is about the color, which is in fact Azure.
Awesome. I'm glad that's finally put to rest.
Although now I've said it so many times, I feel like I'm saying it weird.
It's like spoon.
We digress. The important message that you need to take away from this sponsorship is that with Azure, you can build faster, move quicker, and empower your organization to reach new heights. If you contact an Insight specialist, they can help you find out how implementing Azure will open up a new realm of possibility. Steve, how you doing?
Pretty good, Robyn. Good to see you.
You too? Jeremy, how you doing?
Robyn, always good.
I saw you pacing a lot on that phone today.
It has been a busy day. Lots of phone calls.
Never a dull moment around here.
Nope.
So we have Steve Dodenhoff, our president of the U.S. for Insight, with us. I've totally inverted your title. Steve Dodenhoff, Insight U.S. president. You have a focus on customer experience, which I think is something that a lot of people feel in our organization. And it's the kind of strategic focus that I think a lot of businesses are taking a harder look at because they don't have the kind of control that they did before the advent of things like social media and Yelp and app reviews to help guide them through the best ways to be engaging their customers in a satisfying relationship.
Well, I think a couple of things that are kind of exciting about what we do. Number one, and I always keep pushing our organization, let's focus first on our client. You know, technology, people get all excited about it and they think, you know, there's a lot of cool stuff there. And I've always thought it doesn't really matter if it doesn't solve a problem. One of the things that we have to be doing a lot of is just talking with our clients directly about how technology is going to solve business problems. And what's happened the last few years, which has been really exciting, is not only are we doing a better job talking to our clients about how technology can solve their problems, but their problems and the things that they're trying to work on now have a lot more to do with their customers. And so we get in the conversation of how they're looking at technology and how they're investing to try to satisfy their end user customers. So it becomes, you know, a broader extension of a strategy for the work that we do, trying to influence and build awareness and brand with our customer's customer. And that's really exciting. You know, all of that is coming through sort of the end user customer ability to get into social now and access on web, and information is really everywhere. So it just, those two things have come together in a nice way.
Some of the numbers that bear out what you're talking to and seeing clients really start to orient all of their business strategy towards their clients and customers. It comes from some statistics like 65% of a company's business comes from existing customers. So it follows that they better be pretty happy. In the course of your time in this industry, how have you seen technology start to really propel and enable that movement?
Well, there's a couple things that I think are happening which make our customers more excited about investing in technology that I think helps them serve their existing customer base. So, number one, their customers are a mobile customer base, and their customers are out and about, and so the normal ways in which the traditional customer interacts. Think of banks and going into a retail branch, or traditional retail where going into the store was the experience. And now, there's so much more available through mobile applications where serving that customer base has to be done in channels that are much more friendly to the mobile customer base. And so you're seeing that customer really start to make those investments to ensure, number one, they can keep the loyalty of the customers that now are looking for a different experience or looking for a more convenient experience. The other thing that's happening that I think allows for big investment is everything around data analytics, and starting not to just hold on to customers, but to actually really see what they're doing, when they're doing it, why they're doing it. And to understand, like the profitability of those customers and the orientation of them and the segments that they're in, so that marketing can play a much more effective role in a personalized experience. And a couple of those things, you can see that there's a real return on investment. Like, it's very tangible. If I can serve these people in a different way, in a more meaningful way, in a personalized way, and I know what I'm trying to do with them, that's very, very pointed investments, as opposed to, maybe 10 years ago, it's like, I need a website and I need all this like general marketing and I got to spend a bunch of money on Google and hopefully they find me and I don't even know what search engine optimization is. Like, that was a big investment that didn't have really pointed results. So I think our clients are seeing this very, very narrow focus and get excited about that and see, boy, this is how I wish it was, 10 years ago.
I think that kind of comes back to that first point you made, right? Is customers investing in that IT, because traditionally, like you said, 10 years ago, building up a website, connecting up to Google, IT, your primary customers were internal. But now the IT organization actually has externally facing customers. The products and the services that they deliver touch the actual end customer now without necessarily as much friction or as much business oversight as there traditionally was.
Yeah, well, I think at IT, the really strong IT groups and who have, strong leadership there are playing an active role at the seat with marketing, with sales, really trying to drive and shape, not only here's the data that we have, like our traditional systems house all these things, but more importantly, if we invest in these areas, we can combine what we get from the customer base, like here and now, with history, and repurpose that in kind of a meaningful way that actually can be a proactive effort to grow our business. If IT sits back and waits for the business to do all the work, they're always going to be, in a defensive mode around, well, our systems won't support it, or we didn't proactively plan for that. And actually, they can be such a proactive advocate for the business in terms of how we can leverage what we have moving forward. And we love working with clients who are progressive in that way and who think that, IT can play such a strategic role in reshaping how they're leveraging their investments.
IT is a business enabler, not a cost center, right?
Right. It absolutely is. And even here at Insight, I think there was a white paper done, I can't remember, or I don't know. Do you remember what Amy, remember the article was kind of between Amy and Jeff?
The HBR? The business collaboration between
Harvard
IT
Business
and marketing.
Review. Right. And that was just a classic in line of business leadership with strong views about the value and importance of a certain technology and applications to enable driving, a differentiated customer experience and return on investment for demand generation, in combination with a partner in IT who said we can do this, but we have to do it together, and we have to do it early, and we have to do it up front. And, that's what it takes. And it's so frustrating, in some organizations. And we meet with clients all the time who they're not even talking to each other, and not talking to each other for a variety of reasons. You can just count on customers who are behind here are going to ultimately lose their customer. There is a land grab. It's scary to think. Just think about this. I was in the contact center space for a long time, call center, contact center space, big customer service, lots of calling. If you think anybody who's 14 years old to 25 years old is going to call a call center in the next 10 or 15 years as they mature and they're big buyers, it's not going to happen.
Twitter, that's how they want to reach out. That's how they want to interact and get support.
And you see people who are heavily invested in huge infrastructure around this. And I just see that, that's a big, big problem. And if companies don't change and provide different channels, imagine getting forced into a communication path that you don't want, and you're the customer. You'll do that twice, and then you'll go to another bank and say, I'd rather do it this way, because
twice is really generous, by the way. I don't think people have that much patience.
Yeah, you're right.
I think it's interesting too is, and this is a shout out for Robyn here, is that with the way that people want to communicate, it's very public, right? So I mentioned Twitter or Facebook or whatever these social media outlets are, where that's how they want to interact, but it's also very public. And I think it's a continuing challenge to own your brand, right? To be able to contain those things, to deal with them and to manage them internally in a way that maybe isn't in the public eye, but there's a continuous drive from those consumers to interact in a very public fashion.
And it's actually a very, very simple formula, in my estimation. It's probably a lot more complicated behind the scenes, but it's all about consistency. If your consumers don't know how to engage you and don't know how to get what they want from that transaction or interaction, they're not going to do it again. It's a time waster, and time has become such a precious thing.
So you were just talking about, this customer preference and to some degree, the issues, the patience level of that. And again, in the contact center space, there's some other things that were really, I think, interesting that I learned, which I think, again, is important here when we talk about our clients trying to influence and improve their customer experience. In the contact center space, there's a lot of excitement and hype around speech recognition technology, voice automation, and all that, and a huge amount of investment went into that, and that was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and lots of promise around speech reco, and really it was very expensive, but everything was about the user experience and that's how people would want to interact, right? And then it just became, a horror show, right? And, I was running the company, so it'd be, it was like the worst thing in the world. So what do you do? Well, I run a software company, yes, call recording. Are you guys the guys that do that, speech reco? That's crap. I hang up on them. Agent, So it wasn't good. But one of the things that we learned about that was, the human factors piece is really important. It was that was kind of the second wave of web development was they really learned, you just can't put something up. It's got to, 3 clicks was sort of the beginning of the human factor element and voice reco. And I think what was important about that was you have to draw clients in over time with successive positive experiences. And so if you don't strategically think about how you're building brand and building loyalty around customer experience, and you don't keep creating incremental positives, like don't do the big bang in my mind, because if you do the big bang and it doesn't go well, those customers have a predisposition for anything new you do is bad, because what you just did was new and it was bad. So you want a Pavlov's dog strategy around incremental improvements in this area because you can get people to have this propensity now. They'll learn quickly, wow, every time something new comes, it's kind of cool because you've done it. If you do 2 or 3 new and they're not good, that customer is going to have a experience for something new that I saw on my phone, something new I saw in Brandy, something new I saw. Last 3 times something new is like crappy. And so important strategy that I learned in that, which is trying to coach and bring customers along so that each step of the experience that you're working on, they continue to build loyalty as opposed to like big bang.
One of the things that I'm hearing you say in there is how important those continual releases and improvements are. I think we're all very well aware of how much businesses have to be dedicated to evolving with their customer demands, because that's almost as rapid as the release of technology. And one topic that we want to tackle in this particular season of Technomics is how businesses are using data to do that. So are there any experiences that you have had either as a consumer or in talking with our clients about how they're enabling themselves to read the data and make strategic improvements to a variety of pieces of the customer experience?
So I have spent a lot of time with a number of clients who are doing this, and it's interesting. Some are talking about it and they know what's possible, but they don't know quite yet how to get there. And then we have some that are actually been executing it for a while. But there was a company I met in the Midwest that was fantastic. So it's a natural gas type of a company. They do a couple of different things. They deliver to the home, and that's kind of their core business. So they do it across the United States. And then they also have another group that fills, like the barbecue containers, right? And so they actually make those whole things, and then they put them at places like Lowe's. So anyways, I got a chance to meet with the CIO, and he was talking about his business. And somebody took me there, and I'm thinking, okay, what are we going to learn here? And it was really pretty impressive. So the big challenge, like the big expense for them is, so they have these delivery trucks, like the big, huge trucks have giant tanks on them, like you'd see from the big gas trucks. And so they have inventory, like giant tank yards of inventory around the United States. And then those giant tank yards that's where the big trucks go to get the gas to fill it up. And then they go to like distribution, they fill up smaller trucks. And those smaller trucks are the ones that are moving and going to the homes. Well, huge amount of expense, right? Just in the transportation of all of that. And basically the way that they were trying to manage delivery and where to go was kind of weather patterns and weather forecasting. And so their traditional view was, okay, we just kind of monitor the weather, and we have some historical data about needs. And when the weather in Flagstaff gets below 25, and we have this view of when the last time we delivered for these 5,000 homes, and the tank gets down. They kind of had a model that they built for all of that, and they felt like it was super inefficient, but that was the best that they had to offer, and some costs associated. So if a tank goes down below a certain level, then it's a huge safety hazard. And so it's very costly, which is if they miss the route or their modeling doesn't work, they kind of they have a big cost there. And then the predictability, if they go to a place and get out and stop and the gas is like halfway full or 3/4 full because the weather, they missed the weather thing, then that's a miss. So they kind of threw all that out the window and decided that they were going to. This was kind of a big data and a kind of a. And by the way, the customer experience in all this is it's colder than, and I don't have any gas. Bad problem. Yeah. So what they ended up implementing, they started thinking about technology, and they started to see that it was possible to, in the early days, a couple of years ago, they just actually connected the landline. They built a small little device that they could connect to the tank, and they connected the telephone landline from the house to this device on the big tank, and figured out that when the tank got to a certain level, that it could dial in and basically say, time to fill me up. They subsequently, did a cellular data device that moved that and so in some markets there's not cellular service. They have this now. They have a view of every tank that's out there with an ability to understand where it's at from a volume point of view and be able to go service it in a more proactive way. And obviously it saved them a tremendous amount of money. They figured that it was saving them for every truck was on the road. It was like 1,000 miles a year of driving that was inefficient, plus the safety, plus. And obviously their customer experience was really, really positive. One of the things that they did if you guys remember when the big, what did they call it? The big chill a couple of years ago, Boston.
Yep.
And so they had moved to this model a couple of years before, and they had some other big competitors. And so they were always had now really repositioned all their inventory and strategically moved it all around differently now with a different model. And understanding this, they were able to satisfy the needs of the entire gas industry. All of their competitors in the big chill had their inventory and stuff in different wrong places. And so they really did it out of the goodness. I mean, they didn't charge anything extra, but they just were able to go. No surge pricing.
That is good branding.
Yeah, it was fantastic branding. And so I thought pretty innovative for, a natural gas company to figure out from a customer experience point of view that, the challenges and disappointment when that isn't going well. And then, small ways to think about data in a different way and be able to use that to reposition. And the most important thing was he figured it saved the company $10 to $12 million. So as a CIO, he gets that money as budgeted investment for other stuff. And so they're always working on cool things like that.
Where did
Sorry,
you grow
a little
up?
bit long.
No, that was great.
I was right here in Phoenix.
You grew up in Phoenix.
Very boring.
Steve, you had part of a childhood in Michigan, right?
No, I grew up here.
Oh, well.
I mean, I got 6 months in North Dakota and some frostbite, and that was about it.
That was about it.
Get me back to Phoenix.
I grew up in Pennsylvania, where the scenario that you just outlined is a real one. Mm-hmm. And where I'm going with this is that's the unmet need, right? And we think about that from a marketing and a branding effort a lot, is helping our clients understand the unmet need. Because if we can start to facilitate that, all of the sudden, they're leaps and bounds ahead. And that loyalty is there. So I love the anecdote about, them going in during a time of crisis for a community and just saying, got this. That's an unmet need that was being fulfilled in a very dramatic and real way on a number of levels.
I mean, one of the other things that we're seeing, or I hear a lot of, and I get excited about with our with clients, it's just around data and Internet of Things and like all these terms. What I hear our clients talking about today that they weren't talking about a few years ago, and I think it's really exciting, is they're actually recognizing that they can ask the what's possible question. They now know that the cloud offers expandable, flexible, consumable technology on demand that allows for sort of a different investment model, which means, hey, I don't need to have millions and millions and millions of dollars to do something, and I don't have to have a huge amount of IT resource. So number one, I have a little different way which I could approach this. And then what's possible is, if I wanted to get this information, or if I wanted to deliver to my consumers something different, or if I wanted to try to take advantage of, they know that there are applications and there are capabilities out there to do this. So mobile, they know that they could reach anybody they want at any point in time today, anybody. So it's like, that's pretty interesting. They know there's people people who can make the applications. They know it can connect to the internet, to the web. Some of their core systems, they know that they could house some of it in different ways. And then they realize that the data analytics and all the information that they want can get delivered to them in a meaningful way. So they're starting to ask these really great questions like, man, you see it in retail, what if? And that's fun. That's when people are they're getting the point of mobile and data and cloud all come together to create a what's possible. And then at least the executing is always hard, but when clients are talking about what's possible, it's fun because they're starting to think differently about serving their customers.
Well, and the service element's a really, really important one because there's some research out there that's saying that 55% of customers are willing to pay more for a guaranteed good experience. And clients and customers are just no longer sad. And that's table stakes to have a good customer experience. It actually feels silly to have just said that. There's actually probably maybe it's not a short list of brands out there that get away with not offering a good customer experience. They certainly suffer for it on social media, but they don't seem to be damaged in the long run, which is beyond my thinking. But
it's also created some of the biggest, right? I mean, when you think about Apple, you go back to early 2000s when they were nearly on the verge of extinction. And the way that they saved themselves is by offering that premium experience. Everything from the build and make of their actual devices to the experience that you had when you went into a physical store, very controlled, very, high end,
right,
where they were able to charge a premium for basically the same guts as another machine, but the way that they completely controlled that client interaction was
they had consistency. I think that's one of the challenges with a lot of traditional companies is the inconsistency of the different channels. And so that's alarming to clients, their customer. It's if I happen to call you, it feels like this. If I'm on your website, it looks different. I go into a store, it's very different. And then I see you advertising or I see branding. And so consistency just in general, like for a baseline is really, really important. And then, that kind of repeat experience around what it is to do business together, I think, starts to build momentum around loyalty. I think inconsistency, given so much access to information, choice, other channels, other ways to get things, people's tolerance for sticking around, it's almost fun to go try to find something else because it's so readily available. So I think, you're either totally committed to that consistent experience or you really risk a very kind of fluid customer base because I think people, feel like for whatever reason now they deserve only the best and the best is out there.
Well, another thing too that makes consistency so critical is the threats that are out there. You think of some of the brands that are out there in the financial tech space. If I see something that looks even a little off from a banking experience, my radar goes up. But it could also be the case that a different system and a different style sheet is providing a different user experience, but it's presenting the possibility of a security threat. That's a problem.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of skeptical to begin with when it comes to all of the online experiences. So I think, when you put that into the context of companies who have suffered through their own customer problems around getting hacked or accounts, it's very, very tough to recover. So it's this is again where IT plays a very, very important role, and the CISO and others in protecting the brand, because there's nothing that could, disrupt years and years worth of effort building loyalty and building brand for something, like that to happen, and you don't recover overnight. Look at some of the companies, they just don't recover at all. So, it's a very, very difficult spot for the technology folks to be in, knowing that, there's probably thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people in spots all around the world who spend their every waking moment trying to figure out how to do this. So,
and the scariest part is not even necessarily being, again, controlling that messaging. If something does occur, the ability to contain and communicate the degree of that, right, of that event. And I've worked for an organization where one specific site was compromised, but it was reported in the news that the entire organization and everyone who's ever used this brand has potentially had their information compromised. And it's really challenging to walk that back. It was totally inaccurate, but it was out there, and that immediately becomes perception.
And of course, perception is reality.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back after a quick break where we'll go in depth on customer experience and the many possibilities. When you're like Jeremy and I, and you work in technology, oftentimes you see a news headline and you just start thinking, I wonder how many data centers are required to power that initiative.
All the time. It's so funny. You see traditional headlines come through, and my brain goes into what's underneath that from an IT perspective.
Well, because let's be honest, we live in a day and age where you don't have a lot of opportunity to really dive deep into some of the areas and some of the headlines that come across that are really, really important. And from a technology perspective, where technology is fueling so many of the things behind the breaking news, somebody's got to start telling those stories.
Absolutely. As intriguing and important as the headlines are for us in the technology space, the solutions that power those decisions is just as important.
So that's what we did. We produced a digital magazine called Technically because we found that technically there's so much more to discuss when you're talking about things that really matter and impact our daily lives. So if you want to take a deeper dive on the headlines from a technology perspective, really encourage you to subscribe to Technically. We push an issue once a quarter, and it's always going to be relevant and well-researched. You too can subscribe today at technicallymagazine.com. So there are a lot of challenges and context that go into the considerations that companies make in service to their clients. And you spend a ton of time with clients. In your experience, as you're having these conversations out on the road, do you start to see a common tipping point for companies when they're ready to go all in to invest for technology that's about the customer experience?
I think number one, when I get to meet with kind of curious executives, executives who they're not just like driving their business, they've kind of got a curiosity about them, and it may be a cross-functional group of people. So you're meeting with somebody in marketing or sales, or there's a catalyst. So there's typically a couple people who are starting, they're believers in what's possible, like I said, and they're, nobody wants, one person to drive this. So in a lot of companies, it does take consensus for this. You're going to need people in marketing and sales to believe in it. You're going to need IT on board with it. You're going to need sponsorship at the executive levels and funding for it. So what I typically see is a lot of discussion about, a lot of bubbling about it, a lot of talking about, and I hear the cross-functional teams of IT and marketing in the business really starting to believe that investing in this area as a collective enterprise is going to be value to them, whether it's growing their business. It's typically around growing. It's not so much, I want our customers to love us. It's we think that this is a better way to grow. So when that happens, then they start asking, like, what's first? And that's typically, our spot where we start spending some time with them. And I haven't really come across yet this one defining moment, but it certainly gets back to the point I was telling Jeremy. Like it's when people are starting to talk about what's possible, and there's enough stakeholders going, it's there. We just have to decide we want to go for it because we think our customers are that important. Or we're sitting on a gold mine of data and we just got to figure out how to capitalize on it. That's the trigger point typically for, for change. Now, there's maybe two other ways to think about it that are definitely we know there are tipping points. One is a fairly big organization that's got traditional enterprise applications that are not mobile enabled, and they have a bigger workforce that's required to serve a customer base that's mobile. So this concept of you're tethered to the seat, but you have to be out with your customers, and the applications that run the business don't support that. That's a big tipping point. Like we're stuck. So that's definitely one where people are like, this is not going to be good. We can't even really hire the right people anymore because, and we're not able to serve. So we like that one's for sure. And then I do think in certain industries, healthcare, you see it a lot, retail, you see it a lot, where the customer experience is like big number one priority. So the kind of in-care experience, empowering not only the patient, but the patient's family, the nurses, like that's a big driver. And then the compliance component in combination, that's a big tipping point for, if I have to do this, then why not do that? And there is a lot of competition for care. So we see that in certain key industries, retail, like if we don't really get our customers engaged, big box is a really big boat anchor for when you think of retailers that have, millions and millions and millions and millions of square feet that cost a lot of money, and they can't get people to come in the store because the experience isn't right, and the online experience there, that's a financial problem that if they don't solve, that's a big tipping point. So that's where we would see, it. But across more of a general, it's just when people are getting real excited about what's possible.
It sounds like the collaborative conversation is kind of the luminary, where, if you've got more than one group around the table that's been throwing spaghetti at the wall with respect to customer experience, that maybe that's really the start of some magic.
Well, I think it's interesting, over the last probably 4 or 5 years, I'd say one of the big frustrations with a lot of CIOs and CFOs, probably as important, is line of business people going off and doing their own thing in the cloud, right?
All you need is a credit card, right?
Exactly.
You can spin it up.
Exactly. So beyond, test dev, it's just like a lot of stuff. So what I think lines of business are learning, and what this cross-function, it creates is while there are capabilities and things out in the cloud that allow people to do certain things, if you really focused in on the end user customer, the core systems, the core data, the core information, what's in the heart of the company, which is traditionally what IT owns, is going to be the source of everything you want to do. So if you don't have IT partnered in there, it's not going to work. If you don't have IT playing a role in talking to the CFO and the CEO about security, and that they support this in a holistic way, you're not going to get the funding. And so I think it's maybe coming back a little bit towards this. If we all want what we want, CIO wants security. That's what they're going to get fired for.
Customer wants security.
Customer wants security. CFO wants controlled financials. Business just wants high performance information. And if they can find that common ground, which I think they can, you're starting to see a lot of collaboration, because I think it might have, kind of got stuck a little bit in kind of what's happened the last couple of years.
What is the most exciting thing you see in what's possible? Is there a solution out there or a conversation that's happening with respect to clients that just you're stoked about?
Well, I think a little bit about here what I'm excited about, but when I see our clients, it's sort of the progression. It's not like a solution, but it's this journey of a delighted customer. And I don't know what that looks like. I know that there's some core components that are required as you start. You need certain systems. You need infrastructure a certain way. You need applications. You have to understand mobility. You have to understand data. Then you get to start thinking about, predictive analytics, and then you get to start thinking about propensity to buy, and pretty soon, you are really one-to-one with your customer. And for big companies who haven't ever had to have, or haven't had the opportunity to have an intimate relationship with their customer, everything that we're talking about can produce that over time. And some people will get there faster than others. But the companies who get there quicker, and the companies who are creative in that area, and the companies who, have a passion for it and a vision for it, are going to really dominate the landscape. And they're doing it for the right reason, which is an intimate relationship with their client. And that is really exciting. That's super compelling. And who wouldn't want to do that? Now, where we're at and where we're going allows for that in a meaningful way that, marketing campaigns and slogans did 20 years ago, and internet tried, 15. Like it's getting pretty real right now, and we're seeing it in a lot of different areas. So way more about the journey, and then every time, there'll be some new cool things that are coming out that are refinements of all that, and the integration of elements of social and CRM and analytics that will, be an incredibly personalized experience for us, and allow companies to really be responsive to their unique client needs.
It makes sense that you come from a contact center background. That, like hearing a lot of that is very prevalent in a lot of these contact center type solutions, right? Because that was maybe the 90s, 2000s way of having that interaction where you'll pull data from multiple different sources and provide some of that interaction. But, it just makes sense that, what you're talking about now is just an evolution of that same type of model.
In all the things that we do, there's always there's parallels, and it's interesting. You go out to a lot of businesses, and even though they're different, have the same business problems typically. The gas company is trying to solve for a problem that a retailer is trying to solve. Now, how they get there is different, but when the executives are thinking about solving it, and there's some commonality, some building blocks that are the same, it gets really exciting to see if you can participate in that. So I always thought that the contact center space was, kind of the voice experience, and a lot more of what, and so flavors of voice in terms of automation, voice recognition, skills-based routing, all these things were refinements in delivering a customized experience, and pretty inefficient though, so
a lot of work.
Yeah.
A lot of work.
Yeah. But, so hopefully those are things that seem like they're right in our kind of the technology wheelhouse today, and probably way more efficient.
What is one question that you're asking when you go in to talk to clients to assess how they need to engage with their customers?
It's a difficult question to ask, because if they're not thinking that way, then it's a little off-putting, and because they know they should be thinking, but they don't have the right answer. So I usually try to talk about what's going on with your customer base. What are kind of some of the key initiatives you're trying to solve for? What's going on in the competitive landscape? Just to try to get a feel for how connected are they with their clients, and if they can tell you right away, 10 things, then that they're definitely in that mode. And then hopefully we can encourage, the next meeting is get the marketing people, get other people in, and then let's really dig into that. And we have plenty of opportunity right when we start talking about their clients. What's happening? What's going on in the industry? How competitive is it? What pressures? What are you feeling? They'll start talking about either, they'll have a view of it typically, and it gives us a really good sense for, are they customer centric, client centric, or, we're talking to the wrong people, or technology is kind of where they're focused. So more times than not, though, people have pretty strong opinions right now.
People usually tell you who they are, the way that they respond, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great vision of, what's the Margaret Thatcher saying? If you have to tell them you're a lady, you're probably not, kind of thing, right? If you have to tell people that you're customer obsessed, maybe we should question that. So yeah, we should be customer obsessed, right? I mean, that's the way to win business. We know that being crazy about our clients is a winning strategy for keeping business, just because the ROI on keeping a client is a lot better than spending the money to go and acquire new. It's just hard to win people over. But by the same token, having the courage to do that evolution, to reach into a new market, is something that businesses have to have the courage to do in an environment like the one that we're in. Otherwise, you become a dinosaur pretty quickly. You're talking about customer churn happening about every 5 years, I think is kind of the common standard. So in the last 5 years, who would you say has evolved to offering a really great customer experience powered by technology?
Jeremy, you got anybody?
It's coming to you next.
That's right.
And I know you have an answer.
I do. Man, I'm that predictable.
Don't say Xbox.
No, I wasn't going to say Xbox.
Okay.
Actually, Marriott, with the travel that I've done, like the mobile check-in app and some of the things that they've done to empower just the whole guest experience through technology,
yeah,
I've really, really appreciated. And talk about being very, very customer-centric. Every time, I check in, as a gold member, they're always, oh, Mr. Nelson, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for, being a rewards customer.
Yeah, come out from behind the desk. Here's your key.
Yeah, and they kind of give you the whole, it's that whole guided tour and just kind of going the extra mile. So that's one in particular that I've.
Well, yeah, I travel a lot too. I don't know if you downloaded the Hilton's just rolled out this, the key card pass that goes to your phone.
I think that is so cool.
And so you can check in ahead of time, like you just check in on your phone, download the app, check in, pick your room, and then you get the, for the properties that are enabled, you get the thing on your phone and you just
don't even stop at the front desk.
No, you just say hi, and that's it. So, convenience like that from a consumer point of view is fantastic. I will tell you, I don't know if you guys do you fly American Airlines at all?
Every once in a while.
They're actually their phone system and their interactive system is really good. It's speech reco and it's the best I've seen. It's pretty much you can do anything you want.
That's come a long way. When you get those speech recognition prompts and, the ability to just recognize natural speech patterns and to determine, kind of cueing and like you said, skill-based routing and all that, it's come a long way.
Yeah, it has. Now, I still think there's a place for just a normal in-store experience that, I don't know, I have a Lexus. So I took my car into Lexus and I don't have a new one. It's like 2008, but so it's just, I took it in to get it emission checked. And it failed. It failed because there was like a fuse that didn't work. I took it to Lexus and go, I got to get this thing. And I was traveling all the time, so I had no time to even take it in. He goes, no. He calls me back and goes, it's all ready to go. And I go there and he said, you passed. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I took your car over and got it emissions tested and you're passed. He did that. All I paid was for an oil change, and
wow.
he thank you very much. I'm like, okay, that is what I'm talking about.
That is exemplary customer service.
So I think, we don't always have to, think retail and that kind of in-store experience is dead. There is a place for it for sure.
Absolutely.
I think there's a really strong point in that, which is that probably one of your more memorable recent examples had kind of nothing to do with technology, which is sort of the point, right? That anything that happens in the customer experience should, one, be delightful. And secondly, it should enable an experience with a human as an ideal. And, my example was going to be Disney because, their whole product is experience, right? And having just gone there with my 4-year-old, I am kind of amazed at how seamless and personal it is in the sea of thousands and thousands of people trying to create a memorable experience as well. And a lot of that is happening because of technology. So,
yeah, FastPass.
Oh yeah. I'm a big fan of that Disney app too. Checking line lengths and exactly. We have strategies for which lines to hit, how to fast pass and where we're going next.
My husband was so strategically planned on this trip that he would go get us the fast passes and then also figure out where the churro carts were on the route to the next
That's a man
location.
after my own heart right there.
Yeah, it runs in the family because my daughter met Brave, and she asked her in her quaint Celtic lull, what's your favorite part about being a Disney princess? Because obviously she was there in a costume. And she goes, all the churros.
That's funny.
Good answer, kid.
Very good answer.
Most of the people online were like shaking their heads like, yeah, she's right.
She
Sage
knows
wisdom,
what Disney's
little
all
one.
about.
Sage wisdom, little one. So, well, we have a lot more to cover in this season that speaks to the heart of engaging our customers and creating those delightful and memorable experiences and leveraging technology to do it. There's a lot of really key points that you hit on in here about the collaboration with the lines of business and using data and looking to applications to help create and shape that evolution and that brand journey that we talked about today. So really excited to continue talking about customer engagement this season. And Steve, we really appreciate your time and can't wait to have you back.
Glad to be a part of it.
We'll have you back when we talk workforce enablement, something else I also
good.
know is near and dear to your heart.
Okay, thanks, Robyn, Jeremy.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Technomics. If you want to find more episodes, you can download the podcast from iTunes, Google, or your favorite podcast provider. And for more stories on intelligent technology, visit insight.com.